Good evening and welcome to another Global E-commerce Experts Wednesday webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear as we have a really hot topic for you today. As you can see, we're going to be talking about some e-commerce hacks to help re-establish your trade 8 months on from Brexit. You might be wondering, why are we talking about Brexit? That was, as we say here, 8 months ago, January 1st, the deal was done. That issue's long past. We don't care about that anymore. Well, unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. The continuing developments are always, as you know, the e-commerce industry is so volatile, and things are always coming up and new issues are arising, and the ongoing impacts of Brexit are continuing to cause issues. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit today. We're joined by two amazing special guests who have a wealth of knowledge on that topic. Today's agenda, we're going to be talking a little bit about the new EU-UK trade relationship, how that's changed since January, these past 8 months, what that now looks like, to look at some experiences from current online businesses within the EU, and then find the best route to market with the least resistance, and then touch on some current Amazon challenges, as we know there are many. We'll obviously round this out, as always, with a question and answer session. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free to put them in, and if you can just bear with us, we'll get to them at the end of the session. I'm sure you're very familiar with our EU expansion pathway. If you're a client of ours and if you've attended some of these webinars before, you will be very familiar with this blueprint for expanding cross-border internationally into the UK and EU. This map specifically depicts US to EU, but that doesn't necessarily mean it only fits with those two kind of marketplaces. You can really take this blueprint and use it anywhere when expanding into the UK and EU. And these 7 steps are really the kind of what we like to call the golden bullet for a successful expansion. And you might notice there is some kind of slight changes to this that you might recognize from the previous maps that we've shown you. And Ricky teased this last week. We are currently doing some updates to this. So this is another little tease at what's to come, and we'll officially announce kind of the new and improved EU expansion pathways very shortly, with how this all fits into the kind of changing world of Amazon and e-commerce and UK and EU in these new times that we find ourselves in. Now you might be wondering who I am. Usually you've got Ricky here. Ricky is enjoying some well-deserved time off this week, so I am hosting it from GE's side. I am one of GE's digital marketing execs. Been here at the company for coming up to 3 years now, and usually I'm running these things behind the scenes, producing a lot of the content you probably see, the podcast, the webinars, social, some email communications, website stuff, all that behind the scenes. Before that, I have 3 years experience managing e-commerce platforms as well, and marketplaces, including Amazon. I was an account manager previously to this, helping e-commerce sellers in the US or other marketplaces manage their stores and optimize their listings here in the UK and EU. But you don't really want to hear about me. You're here to learn about our guests and their amazing topics. So firstly, I'm going to introduce Chris McNeil. Chris, can you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Hi, Dave. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. My name's Chris McNeil. I'm Canadian. I've been living in the UK now for about 20 years. My e-commerce experience dates back to 1995, would you believe? But really on Amazon, only about the last 6 years or so. We do around 100,000 orders a year in across 10, 12 different marketplaces around the world. Back at the time of the Brexit referendum, in the days after, weeks after, it became very, very clear to me that my UK/EU impacted. I started learning about it, how it could change, whether that was GDPR, whether that was a hard border, whether it was VAT, whether it was EU employees, a whole wide range of things. And really wanted to start all the way back then to try to make the business more resilient and more ready for the new trading relationship between the UK and the EU. Done a lot of legwork, but as we're going to talk about this presentation and today, there's still a lot that's ongoing. And my colleague Sitska is key to those discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Chris and I met in 2018 when Chris was wondering what was happening with Brexit. We were still negotiating a trade deal, and we got together and we won a tender for the Greater London Authority to train up to 1,500 small businesses to get ready for Brexit. This was very hard to do because nobody wanted to know, because people said, well, how do we know what's going to happen? We don't have a trade deal yet. And then I could tell from my experience that they can actually know how to prepare for that. I have a background in EU lobbying. I'm a Dutch national, lived in Brussels for a while to lobby the European Parliament and the European Commission on business regulation. And in the UK, I was head of the EU team of the Federation of Small Businesses. My background is very much in regulation. And so I met Chris and we put a course together and we said, well, as a UK business, you now trade as a business from a third country, the same as US businesses like yourself will trade. And this is how we set up the course. And we trained these people for, 2 years. And then, of course, came 31st of December 2020 and then 2021, when it all happened and things were no longer theory. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. It's no longer theory.
Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, you're talking about you two met sort of, what was it, back in 2016 before the referendum or just after the referendum?
After the referendum.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like so long ago now, really, doesn't it? And it really was just that. I mean, it was another talk and then another delay and another delay. It feels quite unreal that we're now in this post-Brexit kind of UK EU. So obviously, we're going to be talking about looking from the outside in. Many of the listeners today are probably based outside of the UK and EU, particularly maybe in the US. And it can be really complex overcoming these kind of third country barriers of understanding the complexities of Brexit, not being a local there. I mean, I live in the UK and I still don't really fully understand it, which is an amazing thing that we've got you here today. So can you tell us a little bit about how the new EU-UK trade relationship looks now and what's happened in the last maybe 8 months?
Yes, sure. So yes, well, from the 1st of January 2021, the UK is outside the EU single market and the EU customs union. That is a big difference. So the UK is no longer part of an internal market, which means a lot for trade. It means you have all of a sudden customs procedures between the UK and the EU, which you didn't have for a long time. The customs procedures from the UK side, from importing from the EU to the UK, were phased in to make it easier. However, the other way around, from the UK to the EU was not phased in, so full customs processes applied to export from the UK to the EU, and that meant that UK businesses that were exported were all of a sudden confronted with a whole new set of paperwork, and it was quite complicated, especially if you trade food, if you export food to the EU, and more in particular organic food, because organic food was, well, in practice, was basically barred to export to the EU. It's very strict conditions. Obviously, one of the most important things is that the freedom of movement of people was different. So no free travel anymore to the EU to do business, where you could do business, but you could not provide your service, you could not work, and that's a big difference. As we speak today or yesterday, the EU has brought in some news about the ETIAS. It's the equivalent of the US ESTA scheme. So that means you don't need a visa to go to the EU from the UK, the same as you don't need a visa to go to the US from the UK. You apply for the visa waiver scheme. So the ETIAS I think it's getting ready by the end of 2022. Another big change is sale of services. As the UK business, you could just use your home country rules. So if my business is regulated under UK law, I could just go to France and have clients there, do business, no questions asked. Now that's different. I have to comply with French rules. And also the French may say, oh, you are a UK business. What are you doing here? We don't really want you here. They can do that under circumstances. So it's a lot more difficult, not only for goods to enter the EU, but also for services. And often they go together as well. The latest change we had, of course, was the VAT rules in the EU. The VAT rules have changed from the place of how you call it? Well, the customer has to pay for the VAT. You pay for the VAT where the customer is. And I will talk later about the import one-stop shop that is relevant for US and UK businesses. So that's what happens. If we go to what's going to happen, because people ask me often, is Brexit finished yet? No, it's not. As I said in the previous slide, there is some phasing in for imports from the EU. They will all end, all have come to an end. So importers into the UK face full import processes. And for example, that means physical checks for products of animal origin and high-risk food, and they will take place at the border, a special border control post, and this is still not the case when you go into the UK. And also, imports of organic products from the EU will then require a certificate of inspection. So it's becoming more normal, more third country-like, but it also means that there's a lot more paperwork for businesses. Another detail of that, this was a phasing in measure between the EU and UK that if you had to prove the origin of your products, you didn't need what is called a supplier's declaration. From the 1st of January, you would need a supplier declaration if you have to prove the origin of your product. I'll come back to that origin issue when I talk. I'm going to give one of those examples of these online businesses. Then very important, you may have heard that the CE mark can no longer be used in the UK for products placed on the UK market. And this is quite important because this is the clearest indication that you need one set of rules and one set of approvals for the UK market and one set of approvals for the EU market. And we will see, it's not on this slide, but we will see more divergence of UK law from EU law. At the moment, UK and EU law are quite similar, almost the same, but it will start to diverge further and further because the UK Parliament is going through every piece of law on the UK statute book, and they will look at the EU content in that law and whether they want to keep it or not. So it may mean that UK law and EU law is going to diverge more and more. And then there's other small changes on 2023, 2024, and sometimes it affects you, sometimes it doesn't. It's about labeling of cosmetics products, addresses on labels, all sort of tiny things that are buried in regulations, not big sweeping things. So that's what I wanted to say about goods and also services and what we're looking at now. So maybe I can give some examples of businesses I've been working with the last year. So we had a chocolate seller. He imported chocolate from France. So he is in the UK, imports chocolate from France, and then puts that in little sachets and then export that to the EU, to, let's say, coffee shops in Germany or in Hungary or wherever. Now, because he imports that in bulk, he has to comply with the rules of origin. And that means he has to prove that the chocolate comes from France into the UK and is originating in France. And then that means he doesn't have to pay the 8% tariff because there's the UK on certain chocolate products has an 8% tariff. But if there is a trade deal, which there is between the UK and the EU, you can have tariff-free trade. But as I said, that is conditional upon the rules of origin. So this chocolate maker will be the supplier. He will have to give a supplier declaration in order to prove that the chocolate is coming from France and therefore is tariff-free in the UK. Now, this chocolate trader, he re-exports that. As I said, he cuts it up in little slabs of chocolate and then re-exports that to the EU. You would say that's tariff-free, but that's not the case. He will pay tariffs. And you have to be very mindful of the rules of origin, because if you trade between the UK and the EU, you easily think, oh, we have a trade deal, therefore there's tariff-free trade. No, there's not. It's incredibly conditional, and sometimes you think it's logic. It comes from the UK, it originates in the UK, and then yet you cannot get tariff-free trade. You really have to look closely to the rules of origin. Where does the product really come from, and what has happened to it in the UK? My advice about the rules of origin is, if there is a tariff lower than 10%, don't bother with it, because it's so complicated. Just pay the tariff, and later on, when your trade stream is set up, you can maybe find out what you can save if you apply the rules of origin and what you have to do. But they are so incredibly burdensome and difficult in many cases. I would, in the first instance, not bother with them. Just pay the tariff and get your products over the border. Another example of how difficult it is to get things now over as a third country over to the EU is, I had a noodle manufacturer in the UK, and they needed all sorts of certificates to get their noodles into the EU. And that's because noodles are a composite product. They are eggs and flour and water. And eggs, of course, is a product of animal origin. And so we had to find out all the regulation and the rules around composite products, and whether you needed to register that in the UK, in the EU's food safety tracking system, TRACES, which I mentioned in my slide before. So that was a lot of work to do. And not only that, then we had to look at the country where these noodles were going to, because this country may have their own hygiene rules that they need to prove. So the same is true for makeup. I have a lady who sells makeup online. Lots of product safety rules in the EU, lots of testing needed, and she found out, for example, for one of her products, she needed testing done within the EU. She had testing done in the UK, she had a UK certificate, but now she had to test it in the EU. And that was, of course, quite burdensome. But yeah, maybe you're used to that, because I remember that the Food and Drug Administration has also requirements of fire safety testing in the US. You cannot just export from the EU to the US. You have to, there's the same demands. Not only that, the testing in a certificate, some regulations, some rules require that you have a responsible person in the EU, a representative for product safety. So if there's a product safety issue, the EU or the EU country in question can go to that person, and they have a contact person for the product safety. So there's a lot of changes for these businesses that never had to deal with that, of course. My last example, a fitness wear company, she imported fitness wear from China and then sold them online on Shopify to EU customers. This was becoming quite difficult since the 1st of July, because Shopify pressured her to sign up for the import one-stop shop. The import one-stop shop is part of the new VAT rules in the EU, and it's designed to make it easier, and I think it is, but it's just the beginning. There's lots of teething problems. It means you can deal with your VAT on low value parcels in one-stop shop, And so you don't have to register and deal with VAT in every EU country by itself. And that's good in itself, but it isn't working properly at the moment for some of my customers. And I think as US businesses, you can also use the import one-stop shop, but you would need an intermediary to set it up, to set up your account, and someone needs to do it for you. But it prevents you from having to register for VAT in every separate EU country. Just a note of caution, you can only do that if your sales are not higher than 150 euros. So if your package, the intrinsic value of your package is not higher than 150 euros. So many stories about that. I have to say that the reason why most products get stuck is because of behind the border rules, as they call them. So most businesses at some point will have mastered the customs process and procedures. And or they have found somebody, a good one, who does that for them. But then packages still get stuck, and we are always doing some detective work as to why that is. And the reason why that is just behind the border rules. As I was mentioning this chocolate trader, and he was sending a couple of consignments to Hungary. They got stuck. And we don't know what it is because the carrier is reputable, the customs codes, everything was correct. And then it turns out that Hungary has local rules on food safety, on chocolate in particular, and they didn't know how to comply with that. So this is what this graphic shows. It shows the EU market with the black circle around it, which is the customs border and the customs processes. This is supposed to be uniform throughout the EU, so it doesn't matter where you come into the EU, you should get the same customs treatment. In practice, it could be quite a bit different, but in theory, that should be the same. What is also the same is the blue circle is the product safety rules or product rules in general. There is most rules around products in the EU are harmonized, which is good because then you can consider the EU as one market if your product complies with the EU rules. And that works most of the time. Now, as I said, Hungary had special rules for chocolate, and we didn't know that. And that makes it much more difficult to enter the EU market. So you have to research that. And if you find a country that has less stringent, non-harmonized rules, and for the part they can still impose rules, then try to get in via that country. Because once your product is on the EU market, whether you go through a stringent country or an easy country, it moves freely. Of course, you have to comply with the EU product rules. That's the basis. You cannot circumvent that. But you can circumvent local rules, but you have to find out about them. Okay, so how do you overcome these third country barriers? How do you find that way of least resistance? You need to look at different EU countries and what is the best country for you. So your research should be member country led. So where is your market? Where are your clients? Where is your warehouse? Is it in Germany? Well, how the logistics? Can you locate your responsible person there? Do you already have staff on the ground or somebody or your somebody who you know? How is the situation for taxes? And then most importantly, what I mentioned as an example, what are the local requirements for your products? Are there extra food safety standards on top of the ones you need to enter the EU market? Are there special advertising rules for your product? Rules on company formation should you decide to establish yourself in the EU. Also, it's not mentioned here, but consumer rules are mostly harmonized, but there can be some local consumer requirements, and that is especially in terms of information requirements, but also in terms of liability. So you need to look at all these things in the country that you're targeting, where your most clients are in, and take the EU market from there. Because it is true, once you have managed to get your product into that single market, the EU single market, it moves freely, and that's brilliant. But getting that in is just finding the right country for your products with the lead resistance. Now, how do you find out about that? Because it's easy to say, find out. Of course, you have to look at European Commission websites. There's a lot on regulation and how EU rules apply to what they call third countries. So US companies, UK companies. But you can also look at member state websites. Now, often the EU has portals. They say, okay, here's a portal, and with all the 27 member states websites on product safety rules. It sounds more organized than it is. There is indeed several portals with all the links to all the EU 27 member countries. There is a portal for their customs authorities, and there's a portal for their product rules, and there's a portal for establishing yourself and providing services in that EU member country. But yeah, you have to wade through all that, and sometimes these websites are not in English and are difficult to understand. So it's quite a lot of research, but yeah, whenever you have that knowledge, then that's power. Then you can move forward. You cannot move forward without that knowledge. Then as soon as you have that knowledge, you know what to do to comply. I recommend you do that because, as said, most packages, most consignments get stuck because of non-compliance with product rules or local rules that we don't know about, didn't know, but should have known about. But the carrier obviously doesn't know these sort of things. They just get your package from A to B through the customs border. They know a lot about customs, they do that right. But behind the border, there are a lot of other rules, and that can play a role in how your consignment travels to the end customer. And then you have to learn, you have to try things, because not only the rules are different sometimes in different countries, but also the interpretation of the common rules are different. And sometimes we don't know why in one country it just works and in another it doesn't. You just have to try small quantities and then try it again. And then eventually you will find a way through. I think I have very quickly an overview where we are. I've not finished yet because it's highly complicated. Yeah, one thing I want to say, of course, because of the COVID situation, we haven't seen the full impact of Brexit yet. We have seen the impact on food, import and export, because food needs to come in and out. E-commerce, obviously, lots, because people ordering a lot more online. But because people start to travel now, and it will impact on services a bit more than we have seen just so far. But yeah, get your ducks in a row, get your knowledge. That is very important, and don't hesitate to ask an expert about that.
Sietske, that was amazing. There's really so much information there still, and as you say, you really only kind of scrape the surface on that. People were probably hoping that, as I said earlier on the 31st of December 2020, that's it. Brexit's done. It's all over. But this really just proves that that's not the case at all. It's still ongoing, and I hadn't even really considered that whole pandemic piece of how we've not really seen a Brexit post-pandemic and what that looks like, and how it's currently affecting the situation, and there's still changes to come after that. So thank you very much for that section. Now, I think we were going to talk a little bit about the current Amazon challenges as well.
That's right. Thanks, Dave. I'm going to just talk through these next couple of slides quite quickly. Sietske has said an awful lot about just really thinking through your product, thinking through destination, thinking through marketplace, and all the sort of peripheral issues that come up around that. And this is where our strength really is. We have a lot of conversations around clients. Sietske has made reference to a few there in terms of how we assist them in planning out uh, their interaction and their trade with the EU going forward, that localization, and also seeing the EU as a larger unit. On the Amazon side, of course, it is very easy to see the EU as one aggregate organization. Of course, if you have access to any of the EU marketplaces, Germany, France, and so on, then automatically you have access to all of them. There's some considerations there around, do you trade in pan-EU? What's going to be your tax situation, your VAT situation, your storage situation, et cetera, et cetera. But it is quite easy often to see it as one aggregated environment. And indeed, there are problems arising. Certainly, Amazon is of the size and scale that they have been doing their best, I think, to help sellers prepare for Brexit, prepare for the actual departure back in December, but also they are reacting and guiding to some extent sellers through the continued changes that, of course, is identified in her timeline, and we can expect to see in the next couple of years as well. One of those things we have noticed as sellers, we've got about 2,000 SKUs, and we've noticed a lot of activity, a lot of increased activity in the requirement for CE marking and evidencing of CE marking. We trade in a lot of toys, so clearly that attracts, I think, Amazon's attention initially. So it's a question of providing that documentation, and it tends to come in waves. You think it's all done and everyone's happy with the documentation being supplied, and then you know it, there's another batch of requests that comes through. Both Dave and Siska have touched on the requirement for responsible person, so I won't belabor that. And yes, we can go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So I'm sure we've all felt the pain as Amazon sellers of these storage limitations that really started to bite a couple of months ago, and that's a bit of a circuitous issue here. You know, you might have X number of thousands of units of stock in various Amazon fulfillment centers around the world, and then all of a sudden they cut that down and they say, right, you've got to get from up here to down here, and then they reduce the bar and reduce the bar and reduce the bar. Very, very frustrating situation. We could talk a lot about that, the impacts to IPI scores, but also on a more holistic level, what does that do to your business? Are you forced to sell off your goods just so you can catch up and get below that new bar that Amazon has set? Do you recall stock? What do you do with it? We have a lot of conversations around that very issue with our clients, and indeed work with an ecosystem and partners like Dave and his colleagues, who will be able to provide solutions for that. So if you need to recall stock, it's got to go someplace. If you need to hold that stock in a merchant fulfilled environment just to be able to continue trading, again, it's got to be placed someplace, particularly in EU warehouses, to make it more accessible and relevant to your customers. Of course, there are other issues about cash flow, what happens there, and indeed exploring other platforms off of Amazon. If we could go to the next slide, thank you. So there are traditional ones, eBay and Facebook Marketplace and your own Shopify stores. Each one will come with their own rules and their own sort of particular interactions with the EU, if you will, and we're very happy to discuss those in greater detail. But of course, we've seen the rise, particularly this year, of a number of newer marketplaces. The Range is one that we're experimenting with quite heavily, and we're working closely with their team over there to look at certainly UK sales. Why is that relevant to our discussion on the EU? Well, if you had planned for certain stock to go into the EU and you can't get it there for either a Brexit challenge or just simply a warehousing challenge, then you're going to be looking for other platforms to sell it on, and you might just keep that within the UK and wanting to get it out to UK customers. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, we do have an ecosystem of partners. One of our team likes to describe us as Sherpas, as guides. We've got a lot of information, certainly as Siska has demonstrated in terms of international trade, but particularly trade with the EU, and a lot of knowledge around that space, a lot of knowledge in the e-commerce world. But again, we need to be able to partner with other organizations that specialize, say, in responsible person, in warehousing. Dave can talk a lot more about those. Perhaps in accountancy, perhaps in sort of optimization and growth. So we have those contacts, and we deploy them for the right situations.
Yeah, that's brilliant. As I mentioned at the beginning there, our EU success pathway, we try and kind of call ourselves this one-stop shop for all kind of e-commerce expansion needs, and there's just so much to it that yes, we can help with things like responsible person and 3PL fulfillment, storage, and things like that. But when it comes to some of these other things, product sourcing, advisory services around Brexit and accountancy, I mean, we have our VAT department which can assist with the IOSS kind of new changes. But obviously, when it comes to the complexities of Brexit, that's when we need guys like you to come on and really share that knowledge. So yes, I really agree with that kind of whole partner ecosystem that you've discussed there. It's something we advocate quite a lot as well. So I think we've kind of covered the core of the content, unless that you've got anything else to add there, Chris.
That's it for me. Well, I could talk for hours, but
yeah.
I
think yeah, we as you say, we could all talk so much more on all of these topics. Those Amazon challenges that you kind of just talked about there. I mean, I talk to some of our clients on a regular basis, and they're you're hitting the nail on the head on exactly what they're talking about. Especially that CE marked responsible person, that coming in waves, is something that actually very relevant for us as well. You think, oh, maybe that's it. They've got everyone who needs it has got it, and then no, you get hit by another wave of them. And as well as that IPI score, I mean, that's such a huge thing that we could talk about for ages. But I will open up to any questions. We have time for a couple questions now before we close up, if anyone has any, or maybe this has all gone completely over their head and they're just completely baffled. If that's the case, not to worry, we have some contact information to follow, and you can get in touch with us here at GEE, Chris or Sitska, to ask those questions directly. They're going to be much more knowledgeable on the Brexit consultancy side of things and the intricacies there. I had a couple questions for you, if that's okay, Sitska, regarding some of the things you were referring to, and the whole roadmap. You mentioned 2023 and 2024 at these kind of potentials of some future things that might be coming up further up the road. Is there a time you can see in the future where that's it's done, Brexit, that's the status quo, or is it going to just be continuously changing? Is there always going to be new developments?
Yeah, well, what I mentioned in 2022, 23, 24, these are tweaks. It's phasing in its grace periods. But we will be continuously negotiating with the EU, because the trade deal was very thin. It was on the free trade of goods, and it was a little bit on services. But because we're talking about digital services here, digital trade, there's a lot of new developments around that. There's a lot of that's not said in the trade deal that we need to talk about. And also there's ongoing things about data protection and about providing services. So there will be ongoing tweaks, but also bigger things. For example, Switzerland, which is also not in the EU, it's partly in the single market though, but not in the EU, they have 120 trade deals, and they continually negotiating with the EU. And I think that will be our future as well, because the EU a big regulatory body, so they will regulate on a lot of things. The EU will regulate a lot of things, and a lot of things we don't know yet, like green technologies that need regulation, or digital developments. I don't know, Bitcoin, or I'm not very technical, but other technical developments, and these need regulating if you want to trade on a market. And the two entities, the EU and the UK, will want to do that. And as an outsider from the US and from the UK, you have to follow what happens in those two markets, and you have to be prepared to have two different set of regulations all the time, and have to keep up with your certificates, and you have to also keep up with legislation changing within the member states. So if Germany is a biggest market, you have to look at Germany, what's happening in Germany, and so on and so on. So it is a continual movement.
Yes, exactly. I think probably not the answer people were hoping for, but yeah, that I think that's exactly right. And it's they can be glad that there's people like you to help explain these continual changes to them, especially as you say, UK and EU are going to continue to diverge further and further away in terms of their rules and regulations. I mean, currently they're not too far apart. As it stands, but yeah, they're going to probably going to get further and further apart, which is going to make it much more harder to comprehend both, because there's just more regulations to keep on top of. And then there's the added difficulty of individual EU member rules, which you were talking about, and then the fact that you can go looking for what these rules are exactly, but then they're not even necessarily in English, and it's a whole mess sometimes. So yeah, they can be really glad that there's businesses like you to help them in that fact. So if they want to get in touch with you, obviously if they want to get in touch with us, you can get in touch with us here. Here's our usual contact information. You can email me directly, give us a phone call, or reach out to us on our socials. If they want to reach out to you, as I'm sure they're going to have some questions after the fact, after they're watching this on the replay, or a question will pop up into their head in 20 minutes and they'll kick themselves. How can they get in touch with you, Chris?
Well, best way is with the details right there. So we trade under a couple of names. One of those is resiliencehelp.com. That's our website as well, www.resiliencehelp.com. Feel free to reach out to me, chris@resiliencehelp.com, and there's my number in the UK as well. So happy to have any conversation you like.
Brilliant. And then I think, Sitska, you've got your own contact information here as well.
We've got to mention how actually Chris and I met, but what we then did is this joint venture for the Great London Authority. No, we do Resilience Help together. Chris is the managing director, and I'm the expert arm of this, and we have other people. So if your query is around e-commerce and EU trade, then by all means go to Brexit Resilience Help. If it's really targeted about the regulation, about your supply chain and how to get into the EU market, you can contact me on the email address what you see there, or look me up at LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm sure they will do just that. Other than that, Ricky will be back with you guys next week, I'm sure. Sorry for putting you guys through that. But other than that, all I can say is thank you very much for joining us. I hope you have a very good evening and the rest of your day, maybe, if it's only the morning for you, potentially. But other than that, take care. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Sitska.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks everyone. Much appreciated.